Yeah, right. So I think I've hit the jackpot with these two partners of mine in the way that we structured it. So the 10th way to de-risk your business is to separate the responsibility between three owners. I have in my business what I call strategic permanent partners, Glenn and Tyler. They're not deal partners. I see a lot of guys out social media going to events and they have a different partner on every deal they do. That's really hard to manage. And so we made the decision we were going to become a full service internal investment firm. The three of us were going to be GPs. We were going to split the responsibility three ways. It's worked out incredibly well. Set up your partnerships the right way and try to partner with the same people on every deal.
Josh, welcome back to the show. It's been a while. I think you and I were calculating almost like 1,200 plus days, since you were on the show last. I'm looking forward to catching up.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to be back. It's you do amazing stuff. I mean, shoot, 7 days a week for years. It's amazing. I mean, you've had a lot of guests. You probably learned a ton and share amazing stuff. So thanks for inviting me back, man. Absolutely.
Yeah. Honored to have you back. Your business has definitely grown a lot since we probably talked last. Ours definitely has that long ago. But looking forward to it. You all are doing some pretty amazing stuff. And as the listeners just heard, I mean, they know a little bit about you, but give them a little bit more about who Josh is, your business focus right now. And let's dive in. I just want the listeners to know, hey, Josh is going to highlight today 9 ways to de-risk your business or investments. And I'm looking forward to that conversation. I know the listeners are going to learn a lot. So, but before we do, man, in case they didn't hear, and just so they know, show number 433 was when Josh was on before. If they didn't hear you then, tell us a little bit about who Josh is and let's dive in.
Yeah, for sure. First of all, I'm a family man, father of 3. Follower of Christ. I am a volleyball coach. I coach club volleyball. And I'm fortunate to have finally seen the light after 15 or 18 years as an investor. About 6-7 years ago, really started focusing on commercial multifamily. We did thousands of residential deals and never really got free with that. We were always still transactional, made big incomes, many years, in the millions of dollars range, but never felt free. I always felt like I had to keep working. And today, I probably work about 25 to 30 hours a week. I secret shop our buildings all the time. I show up sight unseen, which is one of the ways to de-risk your business. We'll talk about that. And just focused on what I would consider managed growth. Managed growth. I think everybody has a different pace at which they like to grow. Some people like to grow really fast and buy all kinds of stuff and just go crazy, and they leave this chaos in their wake. We've definitely had periods of like that momentum like that. But I also think that times like these, you want to be a really smart operator and you want to grow at a pace that's convenient and comfortable for you or for me. And so I think that's, again, one of the ways to de-risk your business is to grow at your pace, not what the pace is you see of everybody else on social media. So we'll talk about that too. And so today I'm really enjoying life because I feel like I have a tremendous amount of balance. My kids are going into a bid tournament this weekend for volleyball, and we have a chance to get national bids. Both my girls are really good and really competitive. So I'm going to shut it down on Thursday and go to this bid tournament, and I'll be coaching my face off, man, with these young girls, trying to help them earn a trip to Minneapolis. So that's a little bit about me, man. A little bit of personal stuff and some business.
Yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate sharing some real things about you outside of business, as well as a couple business things that, or at least one I wanted to ask you a little bit about before we jump into the 9 ways to de-risk. But you mentioned working 25 to 30 hours a week. I know everybody's saying, well, how does he do that? He's got all this stuff going on, all this, buying all this real estate, managing all these team members. We're talking about growing, right? Or, you talked about at your pace, but man, how do you get away with only 25 or 30 hours a week?
Yeah, it's cliche, but it comes down to the team, right? So me and my 2 partners, Glenn and Tyler, I'm the majority owner and CEO, but I have 2 partners, and we've split the business up into 3 swim lanes. My swim lane is acquisitions, investor management, investor recruiting, pretty much the whole capital stack, underwriting, a lot of the things at the front end. And then I want to be out of the day-to-day so I can operate outside my business and above my business. So then I can see everything that's going on and poke holes in things and, think think through things. So that's my swim lane. I've got a couple employees and staff that work under me. My partner Glenn is a partner and also handles our CapEx division. So our VP of construction sits under Glenn. All of our unit turns, commons, dog parks, anything that has to do with CapEx falls under Glenn. And then Tyler is another partner of mine, again, minority partner, but he handles asset management. And asset management means he oversees all the property managers. So he deals with the property managers who then deal with obviously everything from maintenance techs to leasing, evictions, and so on and so forth. And so I've really focused in on what I feel is the two most important things, which is control the money. And then you have to be the one that rubber stamps the deal if you're going to buy it. You have to understand the capital stack, understand the risks. And so those two things, I think, is where you can control the entire business by controlling the funding. You can control the entire business by controlling the flow of money. You control the entire business by controlling which deals you buy and which investors you bring into deals. So I've taken that to be my, basically, my mandate, if you will, as a CEO. That's my mandate, to do those two things really, really well. And then allows me to go secret shop everything else. So that if I see something that's wrong, which I just did this morning, I just went to secret shop one of our buildings this morning, I can then feed that back to Glenn, feed that back to Tyler, and then they will take care of the execution of those kind of things. That's allowed me a lot of personal freedom, a lot of income, but a lot of free time as well. Now, if we were in major acquisition mode, Whitney, right now, we're definitely looking at a lot of buildings, but acquisitions have slowed down. So that's part of it too, right? Let's be honest. Like, acquisitions are a little slower, which has given me a little bit more time for now. If that picks back up in Q3, Q4, then I'm going to be back to working pretty heavy hours.
Yeah, no, I just know that caught people's attention too. And it's like, well, we all dream of working 25 hours a week, right? And then playing volleyball the rest of the time, or whatever that may be, or coaching, but no, that's great. It's really a team, right? It always goes back to the people, right, surrounding yourself. But no, that's great. Well, let's jump in, because I want us to have time to talk about these 9 ways to de-risk your business or investments. I feel like it's perfect. It's always perfect time to talk about that, right? De-risk, but now as much as ever. So let's jump into some of those. I mean, 9 ways. But let's begin. Let's talk.
Look, like if you see some of the stuff that's coming out, it was an investor in Houston that just gave back 3,200 units to the banks. There was another investor that just, Arbor just took back, a major portfolio. And so you see some operators and some sponsors that are starting to lose their buildings. And that's obviously rule number 1 is not, don't ever lose the asset, because your limited partners basically get wiped out. And so I think it's very important, as we look at this recession, we look at some financial distress, there's definitely upside and opportunity, but we have to de-risk the things that we're doing. And when things are really good for everybody, there's a lot of cowboys that make crazy decisions, and they don't feel like there is any risk. And so now you realize that there was true risk in the market over the last couple of years. It just didn't come to fruition until now. And so there's 9 ways to de-risk your business. So let me go through these real quick, and then we'll dig into a couple. So number 1 is always invest for the long term and get long-term fixed rate cash flowing financing. And I'll explain that. There's really 3 different types, but I'll explain that. That's number 1. Number 2, always fast forward your CapEx and push it as hard as you can in the first 12 to 18 months. I hate doing CapEx organically. Number 3, always secret shop your buildings and show up sight unseen. Number 4, review your financials in detail every month without exception with your property manager and your CFO, and with the CFO of the property manager. Okay, because the regionals, they don't sometimes even understand your financials. The property managers don't understand the financials. So we force the CFO of our property managers to sit with our CFO, and then me and Glenn and Tyler. So review the financials. Number 5, commit to sharing everything with your limited partners. This is a big one, and I'll explain this in a minute. Number 6, over-raise capital and make sure you have at least 6 months worth of operating capital in your operating account. And I'm not talking about stealing from your CapEx account to cover operations. Okay, don't do that. They're separate. Okay, number 7, underwrite deals at 70 to 75% occupancy and know if your deal's going to cash flow or if it's going to bleed and how much bleed it's going to have. Because right now, a lot of deals are bleeding. Number 8, use the same vendors over and over and over and over and over again. We're talking about contractors and property managers. We'll talk about that. Number 9, buy in 1 or 2 submarkets and stay close to home. Do not diversify into 8, 10, 12 submarkets and then think you're going to be able to understand all those submarkets, right? I would rather own 500 to 1,000 units in 1 or 2 submarkets than own a 200 unit here, a 50 unit there, a 100 unit here, a 250 unit there. Don't do that. Then there's a bonus way to de-risk your business, which I'll talk about. I've already kind of talked about it already. I'll talk about that a little bit more at the end. But that would be number 10. So those are the 9, Whitney, just ripping through them. I mean, if there's 1 or 2 or 3 that you really want to peel back the onion on that you think would be best for your audience, why don't you pick and choose where you want?
There's a number of these that we should talk about. I feel like, man, this is a great list. I really like these. I mean, always investing for the long term. I feel like, man, that's hitting at a lot of people right now, right? I mean, it's unfortunate, right? For so many, they didn't get that long-term financing like you're talking about, and they're going to feel it this year, and they are, or they didn't plan, for that, which most didn't. But maybe hit that for just a minute. Let's move on to a few other things. But planning for the long term. Anything? You said cash flowing financing. Is that what I heard?
Yeah. So what I mean is by that is, look, there's really 3 types of long-term fixed rate financing. There's seller financing, right? That can truly be long-term, 5 to 15-year financing. It's flexible. You can negotiate almost any term that you want. Number 2, there's bank financing. Banks is usually you can negotiate 5, 7, 9-year terms. The trade-off, though, typically is there's a personal guarantee. And then number 3 would be agency debt, Fannie, Freddie, HUD, et cetera, et cetera. Now, what many people did, as you would know, Whitney, is they went with floating rate bridge financing over the last couple of years. And they said, oh, no, we're not going to do any bank financing because everybody hates recourse. Okay. Maybe one of the best decisions we've ever made was to buy properties and actually use bank financing, but very low leverage, 65 to 70% or less. Use bank financing and fix that debt, whether it's through a swap, whether it's through, it goes on the bank's balance sheet, fix the financing for 5 to 7 years. Because again, rule number 1 is don't lose the asset, right? So the worst thing you can do is sell or refi at the wrong time. Well, obviously Q4 of last year was the absolute worst time. Transaction volume dropped by 85%. Nobody was transacting. So if you had to refi or sell, you were screwed because nobody was transacting in Q4 of last year. Even Q1 of this year was pretty slow. So those 3 types of financing versus, hey, I'm going to get the highest leverage I can get with the most proceeds I can get, and I want to go non-recourse with bridge or floater, and then maybe get a cap, a rate cap, that type of thing, and then go with an extension. Well, as we know now, a lot of those rates doubled, mortgage payments doubled and tripled, and now they're escrowing for future rate caps, and these cash flows are going negative, right? And so thank God we didn't do that. We, in some cases, went with bank financing and put up a personal guarantee because we wanted to invest for the long term. And I did not look at 65, 70% leverage as very risky. Look, Whitney, I'll give you an example. We bought a building last year, maybe 2-3 years ago, for $16.3 million. The bank advanced at closing $12.25 million. Okay, got investors, limited partners to bring in $4 million. And then the bank also gave us another $2.5 million in CapEx through a draw. So how much risk is there in that personal guarantee? That value of that building is not going from 16.3 million below 12.25. It's not going there. And especially if we execute our CapEx plan, the value of that building is going to go up and up and up. Now, when I bought that building, it was making about $165,000 a month of gross cash flow. Today, it's making $225 a month of gross cash flow. right? So the value of the building today is worth at least 22 million. If I got an appraisal, it would appraise at 22 million. I bought it for 16. My debt on that thing, I've taken a couple draws. I've done $2 million of draws against a loan. We owe 14.25. It's worth 23. So what was the risk in that personal guarantee? Almost zero. So in that scenario, you're much better off sponsoring the loan, personal guarantee. I'm okay with that because the risk to me was so low. I actually viewed the fixed rate or the floating rate bridge debt to be more risky than the personal guarantee. And a lot of guys went with the opposite.
Yeah, your loan value is so low. Yeah, I agree. I love that scenario. I appreciate the example. You mentioned the CapEx a little bit. I wanted to just spend a minute or two. Always fast forward CapEx, like you talked about, pushes hard in the first 12 to 18 months. Elaborate on why that's so crucially important and de-risks the deal.
Yeah, look, like if you want to force value and true value add, value appreciation, you're going to have to underwrite for some vacancy. And we've had deals drop when we bought them. At 98% occupied, that dropped down to 70% occupied on purpose. So we could really hammer out the CapEx. Then we would turn a unit in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, like a full turn. We would lease it out and get a $400 to $500 rent bump. I would rather do that and force the value quickly. It also de-risks my loan because the value is now higher. I would rather take and underwrite for some of that vacancy and maybe even a little bit of a cash bleed to knock the CapEx out early. Also, the other thing it does, it allows you to then settle the building down within 12 to 24 months. And so now all that contractor dust and all the moving parts are gone instead of having contractors working on your building for 5 years. That's going to hurt your leasing. I would rather hurt my leasing for 12 to 18 months and then really have a quiet building that's stabilized and then be able to lease out and get back to full occupancy. So we've done this. Look, I've done 19 of these syndications. I've done it the slow way. I've done it the fast way. It actually de-risks your business by doing it quicker.
Yeah. No, I like that as well. And I want us to have time to get to a couple more of these at least. But you mentioned commit to sharing everything with your limited partners. I completely agree. But tell me about your process to do that and how you're sharing everything and how your team is maybe, I don't know, simplified this process, right? Of updating investors on everything.
Yeah. So first of all, I know a lot of operators that do not share their P&Ls and balance sheets. Let's start with that. Share your P&L and balance sheet at least quarterly. We do our P&Ls on a cash basis, not accrual, because I look at accrual financing and as witchcraft. Accrual is great. That's how a lot of people do it. Cash is cash. If we have cash, we put it on the P&L. So that's the one thing. I think accrual accounting is I call it witchcraft. It's not witchcraft. It's generally accepted, but I think it's witchcraft because you can really kind of finagle the numbers a little bit with accrual. But those are the two big ones. Share those at least quarterly. Number two, all of our capital improvements all goes into a PowerPoint, and the exact documents and spreadsheets that we use to actually manage the CapEx, we do not edit those. We share them as is with limited partners. The exact vendors we paid, how much did we pay them, how much per unit, all of that stuff gets shared once a quarter. Video update. I can't believe how many operators don't get on video once a quarter and talk to their investors about what's going on, the good, the bad, the ugly. Tell them everything that's happened, right? Also, limited partners, a lot of them don't know how to read a P&L. So actually share the actual P&L for that quarter on your screen share and walk them through it. How much money did you spend on insurance? Is insurance costs going up? How much did you spend on utilities? Are you able to save any money on utilities? What's your plan for the next quarter? I love managing the business on a quarterly basis. So those are 4 must-dos. Now, the other thing that we do is we always share our cash position every month. Now, we share it quarterly, but we'll say, this is how much cash we had on January 1st. This is how much cash we had on February 1st, March 1st, and so on. This is how much CapEx we spent January 1, February 1, March 1, and so on. This is how much the bank owes us in a draw January 1, February 1. So they see it on a monthly basis, even though we're reporting it quarterly. So it gives them some insight onto cash movement, right? So those are 4, 5, 6 of the things that we do every quarter without question. And sometimes I'm like, crap, man, we were kind of slow this quarter. I don't know if I really want to get on the phone and talk about this, but I do it anyway. Because it also, what it does is that as I talk through it for limited partners, I know I'm reiterating to myself what the major points are that we need to continue to focus on, and go back to the business and back to my partners and say, we've really got to focus on this, right? Because if you force yourself to be honest and put it out to the world, you're going to be a better operator. You're just going to be a better operator.
It's a great list of things right there. This is good. There's a couple of things there you mentioned, like a lot of LPs don't know how to read a P&L, and so do a video and talk about it. I think it seems so basic, but most don't do that, right? And bring it up on the screen and talk through that, educate your LPs. And I think you're gonna retain more LPs by doing just those things, right? And thinking like that, and not assuming they understand all of this. Let's see. Oh, yeah. And the cash position every month. I appreciate the list there of things that you mentioned. And you talked about, and maybe back up just a little bit, you mentioned you all do this in a presentation, maybe internally, and then you all just use that for your investors as well. Maybe talk through that process just briefly.
Yeah. So here's our process, right? So our property managers are due to produce for my CFO our P&Ls and balance sheets by the 20th of the following of the month. So if we close out January, it's due by February 20th. If we close out February, it's due March 20th, etc. At the same time, my CapEx team has to close out their month and report their CapEx numbers also by the 20th for the previous month. Then my CFO has 1 week to look at all those and go back CFO to CFO and poke holes in the numbers and make sure they're meeting budgets, or make sure that they're in the right categories. If there's an outlier, for him to get an explanation of why there's an outlier. Maybe we had a large water bill some month, or maybe we had a large unit turns, or maybe we had, like back at Christmas, we had a bunch of ice, and we had some ice and snow damage. So Roberto, my CFO, then goes through that. Now at the end of the quarter, what's happened, if you close out, let's say Q1 at the end of March, that's all due by April 20th. Then by April 27th, Roberto's gone back and forth. Now Roberto's got to present that to me, Glenn, and Tyler on the 27th. And then I'm recording for my investors by the 30th, and we're paying out that quarterly preferred return by the end of that month. So everybody on my team knows that's the system. Those are the deadlines. That's what we got to meet. And they know that I'm going to be really, really upset if I can't record that video for investors and pay out the preferred return by the end of April for Q1. Okay, so that's our system. It's been that way for years. And now everyone's getting pissed off if we don't have the financials from the property manager by the 20th, and Roberto's not doing this thing by the 27th, and we have our meeting on the 27th, 28th, and I'm recording by the 30th. If that's not happening, our director of investor relations is she's having heartburn over that. She's pushing us all. I got to get this out by the 30th. So it comes down to setting these deadlines that everybody has to meet. That's worked really well for us.
To the CFO versus the asset manager there, doing that, with the other CFO reviewing the financials, those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Roberto, look, he takes a lot of pride in the fact that we're hitting budget. We put together budgets. We spend a lot of time at the beginning of every year putting together budgets for that year. The property managers present the budgets, and then we go negotiate those budgets with the property managers. We push the property managers hard to make sure that those budgets are tight. They're not going to have a lot of fluff in there, a lot of fat. And then Roberto's we're gonna manage the property managers hardcore. So it's really Tyler, who's my partner and asset manager, and Roberto as CFO, kind of double teaming the property managers together to make sure that they're hitting budget. And if they're out of budget, why? You got to have a good explanation.
And are you all third-party management or in-house?
So we hung our hat on CapEx, and we own the construction company that's doing all of our improvements. So we didn't want to do the third-party management and CapEx at the same time. So we outsource and do third-party for property management.
Okay, no, it's interesting. So tell me though, let's move to, I think it was point number 6, because I ask this often. Almost every operator interview, I say, hey, okay, how do you prepare for a downturn? Or we talk about reserves. How do you calculate reserves? Some of that, and you talked about over-raising, having at least 6 months of operations in reserves. I love that. And I've even been scrutinized for this in the past. I tell you what, we had a deal. We were closed in March of 2020. So a week before the country shut down, we had $1.5 million in reserves. And there were some people that were saying, Whitney, that's too much. Like, that's hurting investor returns. Like, what? And the week later, we closed. A week later, you know what happens, right? But we didn't know if the world was coming to an end or what. But everybody was happy we had that $1.5 million in reserves, right? That wasn't part of CapEx or, like you said. But tell us a little bit about that. I feel like it's so important. I'm so big on that as well. So I just want the listeners to hear why you say 6 months of operations in reserves and what that means of operations. What does that include exactly? How do you calculate that?
So what we're looking at is basically the full stack of operating expenses. So everything from management fee to insurance, real estate taxes, all the utilities, G&A, marketing and advertising, legal professional, all of that stuff. So a full 6 months worth of all of that. So if we took in zero income for 6 straight months, we would have enough money to still pay all the bills for 6 months, right? What do people say about us personally? We've been taught since, well, obviously personal finance teaching is terrible in this country, but if you're getting good personal finance training from a young age, what does everybody say? Have your rainy day fund. Make sure you've got 6 months of your bills in reserves. If you get fired or you want to switch jobs as you and your spouse, have 6 months ready. It's like basic principle, right? You also look at books like Ray Dalio. You look at books by Tony Robbins. You look at real great business thinkers that say, look, you're going to have a downturn. It's going to come from somewhere that you've never seen before. It's a great new book out right now called The Psychology of Money, and talking about people that get DQ'd out of business entirely or out of investing entirely. And it came from somewhere that they never saw. Like every 20 years, the world totally changes. And so you could be on the cusp of the world changing technologically, socially, politically, and it's a risk that you never saw coming. Well, we got to have at least 6 months. Now, is a building really going to collect no cash flow for 6 months? No, like we're going to collect some cash flow, right? So really that 6 months really represents probably a year and a half worth of bleed. If you bled like 20, 30, 40,000 a month, you eventually that money would run out. Now, if you look at these guys today that did, floating rate debt and the interest rates went up, they got killed because they had very little operating money at all. And they closed with the least amount of investor dollars possible because they didn't want to dilute the returns. I get that. They didn't want to dilute returns, so they didn't raise a lot of extra money. But now they're DQ'd. Now they're out of business entirely. They're giving assets back to the banks. And they're out. They'll never get back in. And so that to me is, look, it goes along with number one, Whitney. You got to invest for the long term, get long-term debt, have a lot of operating cash. Because I've been an entrepreneur since I was 21 years old. I've never had a boss. Never in my whole life. I'm 46 years old, 25 years. I've been through 3 major downturns in the economy and my personal life, through surviving cancer, the economy, et cetera, et cetera. So I've seen this. I've seen it multiple times. I've never gotten DQ'd. There's been a couple times where I've almost got DQ'd, but I had operating cash to work through. And then eventually things start to improve and get better, right? And so that's to me, the minimum. That comes from 3 different cycles of personal or economic upheaval that I thought, man, if I didn't have this 6 months, I'd be in real trouble.
Yeah, no, I just appreciate you elaborating there. I've talked about it so many times on the show. And still, I hear different ways people think about it, or we'll have 1 month from the beginning, and then we'll take it from cash flow, to increase that, or we'll do some CapEx stuff out of some reserves, or there's just all those things that people try to justify, right? Raising less or having less in reserves, and I couldn't agree with you more. Having that in there,
oh man, you can't rob money out of a bank loan from the bank is not going to give you an extra draw to fund operations. That's not the covenants of the loan. It's not in there. They're not going to allow you to do that. And so I've seen other operators fall into we need $800,000 to pay these aged payables, and the bank's going to give it to us out of our CapEx draw. Bull crap. They're not going to give it to you. It doesn't work that way.
You mentioned full stack of expenses. I appreciate you just, it's a full stack. And I hear some people say, well, it doesn't include, say, debt service or, do you all include debt service in that as well? I would hope.
Oh, yeah. If I didn't include debt service, absolutely.
I want to ask because I hear it all kinds of different ways.
limited partner returns, the pref payments, that's out because that's a profit.
Right. That's from cash flow, right?
Not that, but debt service for sure.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the clarification. We could talk so long about each one of these things right here. It's a great list, though. I love that. But man, we're running low on time, so we're going to have to jump to a few final questions, Josh. Oh, actually, you had a number 10, though. Did you want to share that?
Yeah, right. So I think I've hit the jackpot with these two partners of mine in the way that we structured it. So the 10th way to de-risk your business is to separate the responsibility between three owners. I have in my business what I call strategic permanent partners, Glenn and Tyler. They're not deal partners. I see a lot of guys out social media going to events and they have a different partner on every deal they do. That's really hard to manage. And so we made the decision we were going to become a full service internal investment firm. The three of us were going to be GPs. We were going to split the responsibility three ways. It's worked out incredibly well. And the stuff that we had that was outside of our market, that it wasn't the three of us, we've divested of almost all of those and sold those off because we felt like we had less control. And it was a lot more kludgy. It was a lot more cloudy on whose responsibility is it? Who's going to follow up? Is it your responsibility? Is it mine? Now, the fact that we have these three partners with three swim lanes, one with acquisitions and raising capital, one with CapEx, one with asset management. We can also, I just had this question, Whitney, right before we got on the phone together. An investor asked me, Josh, what if you got hit by a bus? And I was able to explain to her, it's me, Glenn, Tyler, then our CFO, Roberto, then our VP of construction, Dave. So 5 of us would have to get DQ'd for the business to really be hurting. She loved that answer, right? So that's really the 10th way, is to set up your partnerships the right way and try to partner with the same people on every deal.
Love that. Yeah, the relationship matters, right?
Oh, yeah. Especially when there's chaos. Especially when there's a recession, especially when things aren't going right. That's when you find out that a weak partner can become a major liability.
All right. So burning question I know all the listeners have. What's going to happen the next 6, 12, 18 months? And I know none of us know for sure. However, what I always say is what you think is going to happen affects what you're doing today, right? And affects, whether you're buying or selling or all those things. So none of us really know, but depending on what we think, it does change what we do. And so what do you think is going to happen the next 6, 12, 18 months? And how is that affecting your all's actions in the business?
I speak from real day-to-day operation here on where I think this is going to go. So really this comes down to a couple things, really 3 things in my opinion. So number 1, the Federal Reserve pushed the banks as hard as they could, and banks cannot withstand any higher interest rates. Banks are essentially a function of the government. The banks are essentially a function of the Federal Reserve. So banks and the government are essentially hand in hand. So if the banks start to fail, the government can also not afford higher interest rates. We cannot afford 2 or 3 times payments on our federal debt. It's impossible. So not only the banks, that's a test market. If banks like Silicon Valley Bank are starting to fail, that also means that our government, if interest rates went up, would fail. So we hit the limit. They cannot go higher. So that means inflation's here to stay for a while because you can't truly tame inflation. So that's point number 2, which means that interest rates are now, I feel, going to stay about where they're at. The 10-year treasury is at about 3.5, 3.6. It's going to stay there. I don't think there's going to be a lot of interest rate hikes for the rest of this year. I do feel like there's going to start to be decreases in the Fed funds rate in Q1 of 2024. I think if you're looking to refinance, the best time to refinance is going to be late 2024, 2025. I also think that something is going to happen. And when I say something, Whitney, it's going to be a couple things. 1, war with China. If war with China happens over Taiwan, interest rates are going to drop back down into the 1.5, which means now you're going to be getting loans at 4%. That's 1. 2, government could default on their debt. If government defaults on their debt, again, interest rates drop down to 1.5, maybe even back to 0, and you're getting debt at around 4%. Okay, that's the second one. Number 3, right? If we don't figure out how to manage our money better within our country, right? We're taxing people left and right, and our government is spending wildly all the time. We're constantly over our budgets in the government. If they don't find a way in the next 3 to 5 years to tame that, we are absolutely going to default on our debt, and we're going to be in major, major trouble in the next 5 years. I don't think that third one's going to happen, but war in Taiwan drops interest rates. The recession drops interest rates. Any possible default by our government drops interest rates. So one of those is going to happen, and then interest rates are going to drop. So we're counting on 4% bank and permanent financing by the end of 2024.
Love that. I love the list of things too. I was taking a bunch of notes there, and
you got to have an investment thesis, right? You got to bet on something. That's where we're betting. That's what we think is going to happen.
Yeah. So tell me what that means you all are doing over there, like the next month, 2 months. What does that look like right now?
Yeah, I mean, right now we're hustling to get all of our CapEx done. Last year, we spent over $5 million on unit turns and capital improvements. We turned 500 units, and I'm not talking about make-readies. These are half turns, full turns, major, major improvements. So we're doing that. We're forcing appreciation in these buildings by turning the buildings, a lot of C-class and B-class buildings, bringing them up to like at least a B+. That's major. I am right now in the last 3 months, I've been on the phone with investors constantly, new investors, previous investors, possible new prospective investors, warming up tons and tons of capital. According to the Mortgage Bankers Association, there's somewhere between $900 billion and $1.5 trillion. That's all going to come due in the next 2 years. We're counting that about 10% of that is going to go into major distress. So that's, $100 billion to about $150 billion of major distress. A lot of that distress is going to happen in the office sector, and it's also going to happen in multifamily where people got short-term loans. So we're warming up tons of capital and building relationships, because when this stuff comes, good deals and good distressed deals go very fast. Somebody's going to find out about it. Somebody's going to pounce on it and buy it. So you got to be super liquid and ready to go. So we're warming up tons of cash right now, staying in touch with lots of investors. Guys that screwed up, or they're screwing up their operations right now, they're hiding from their investors. So we're doing the opposite.
Yeah, love that. Great answer. Unfortunately, man, we can keep talking. I love this conversation. I want to hit a few final questions though, kind of quickly. What's your best source for meeting new investors right now?
For sure, it's our podcast. We have what I call a brand syndication system. We push out our brand everywhere we can. Through lots of different platforms and email marketing and that kind of stuff, and getting people into our funnel. And then I take pride in one-on-one Zoom calls with investors. I don't do a lot of things in group. I don't push a deal out. And we do a lot of things of building major relationships. So we're able to go 506B or 506C. But I take a lot of pride in me meeting investors at least 2 or 3 times. So I'm investing a lot of my time there. And I think that works really, really well.
I think it's time well spent, especially when you're talking about needing that cash available, right? In the near future. So what are the most important metrics that you track? It could be personally or professionally.
Yeah. Look, on a professional basis, we track against budget. Like what percentage are we above or below budget when it comes to operations? We also track our capital improvements like crazy, like absolute fanatics. That's allowed us to do some cool stuff, Whitney. When we manage a lot of that CapEx, we're able to get things like rewards from Lowe's. We just got a $30,000 check from Lowe's in an annual rebate out of nowhere. We'll earn this year probably $200,000 in free cash from Lowe's because we spend so much money there. So we manage that absolutely fanatically. I track every email that we send out. I track the open rate. I track the click-through rate. We track which emails get the best opens, the best headlines, so we can reuse those headlines. I can tell you that emails that get the best opens, the headline is 4 words or less. Okay, so if you're sending out emails to your investors or to a group of followers, we have about 75,000 email subscribers, 4 words or less. It's the best open rates, the best click-through rates, the best engagement. If you send out long emails with long headlines, they're not going to get opened as much, so we track that. And look, man, on a personal basis, yes, we invest. Yes, we're very fanatical about our investments. But I think the thing I'm most fanatical about is my time with my kids. And the reason for that, I had a friend of mine tell me back when his daughter was 12, he said, look, Josh, you think you have your kids until they're 18, 21, 25. You don't. You have them till they're 12. And I was like blown away by that because my daughter was like 8 at that time. And I realized that as they got into high school, and now that my daughter's about to turn 16 and get a car, I'm like, she's not going to want to spend a whole lot of time at home. I did not when I was 16 with a car. And so
I put much gas in that tank.
Yeah. the gas tank is empty. You can't go anywhere. Sorry.
That's right.
But the truth is that the time that I think is critical, if you have young kids, look, I think the time is most critical is from age 7 to age 13. Because that's the time where they want to spend time with mom and dad. That so many people are stuck in a cube, they're stuck working, or they're a doctor in a hospital, and they're hustling their face off, and they miss it. Like, I don't miss anything that my kids are doing. I'm a super engaged father. I'm also not like the nicest father. I'm a super disciplinarian. My wife is even more of a disciplinarian than I am. And so I want my kids to grow up to be amazing humans.
That is being nice, being a disciplinarian.
Yeah. I've also told my kids that they're going to get none of our money. Like, even though I probably will give them some of it down the road, I've told my kids that they have to absolutely make their own way. High school, college, and beyond. I told them no matter what, they have to invest in real estate at least as a side hustle. But I want them to forge their own path, right? And I don't want them thinking that they're going to just, live off of my wife and I's coattails and have life be easy. I want their life to be difficult because that's when I learned the most.
Yeah, don't we all? Yeah, so many things there we could talk about as well. Give us a habit that you're disciplined about that have produced the highest return for you.
Look, man, one of my favorite habits in the world, right? I go to sleep almost every night by 11:30. I'm up every day at 6. I think that your sleeping habits, not only have people to talk about this enough, like it's all grind, work harder. One of my favorite quotes in the world was actually, it was a poem that John D. Rockefeller used to cite. And actually, I think in one of this recent book, I heard it again, The Psychology of Money, that Rockefeller used to sit in meetings and just listen and think. To me, if you're going to be a really great leader, you have to be rested and have a clear mind. So I drink very little now. I get at least 6 to 7 hours of sleep, which is all I need, about 11:30 to about 6 in the morning. And I guard my sleep more than anything else, more than my food, more than my workouts, more than my reading, more than my financial habits is my sleep. Because if I sleep well, I wake up with incredible energy, incredible drive, incredible motivation, and clear mind. And so if you're having any kind of trouble sleeping, like look at your other habits and make sure you're getting rock solid 6 to 7 hours of sleep every night. And that will make you a better investor and a better leader.
Definitely changed my life. My wife and I got serious about our sleeping habits for sure. What time to bed, time up early. But how do you like to give back?
I think I give back through coaching voluntarily. I don't think there's any generation that's more at risk than our current 25 and under generation. They're absolutely being attacked through social media, through advertisements, through confused different ideologies, all different kinds, from the right and the left. I'm not blaming any side, but our young generation of 25 and under is absolutely being crucified right now from every direction. Financially, they're not being taught. Marketing wise, they're being body shamed. Especially young girls. Bullying that happens is incredibly brutal. And so, I think giving, for me, business has been a great fortune, a great blessing for me to give me the free time. I'm blown away, Whitney, by how many parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles that have time don't go get more involved in coaching their kids, volunteering at the schools, helping out with these young kids, because if you don't raise your kids, someone else is going to raise them. And I feel like I have the opportunity through being a volleyball coach and a basketball coach and a football coach, all these things that I coach voluntarily, that I have a major impact on dozens and dozens, if not hundreds and hundreds of kids. So that's the way I like to give back. You know, older adults, some of these parents, like they're long gone. I'm sorry. Like they're stuck in their ways. I can't change the way they think. But if I can help their kids that are going through parents being divorced and all these other issues, if I can help those kids learn not just about sports, but about business. I teach these kids about business while I'm teaching them about volleyball. That to me is a great way to give back to this generation that I think is absolutely under assault right now.
I love that. What is it? Stalin, of all people, said something like, you know, he could take over. If he could take over any country, just give him all the kids, like 7 years and under or 4 years old and under, you know, and he understood the importance of what we're teaching, right? And so in a bad way, but I just mean, we could do that in a good way as well, right? Even goes back to the parenting you were talking about.
For financial education. Yeah. For different ways to make their own money, to be independent. Like they don't want to be dependent on the system, but the system teaches them to be dependent on the system. You and I are obviously, success cases of being outside of the system. We need more of that.
That's right, Josh. I feel like you and I could keep talking for a long time about lots of things, but unfortunately, we have to wind it down. But I'm grateful for your time today. I know we've gone over a little bit as well. Even if somebody just really seriously think through these 9 ways to de-risk their business that you laid out today, you're going to be so much better off, right? I just appreciate your time and a number of other things that you highlighted that was unexpected, which I'm very grateful for. Just looking forward to getting to know you a little better personally as well. But how can the listeners get in touch with you and learn more about you? I see you do some coaching. You have a mastermind. I was looking at your website a little bit. Tell us how they can learn more about it.
So one way is if people want to learn about some of our investing systems, we decided this year to do a quarterly live training event. It's a couple $100. We do it on Zoom. They can get a ticket for that at foreverpassiveincome.com. And then our main website, which is freelandventures.com, has everything we do, like our portfolio, our YouTube channel, a bunch of free training videos, all that kind of stuff, our podcasts. They can all get access to that at freelandventures.com as well.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Syndication Show, brought to you by LifeBridge Capital. LifeBridge Capital works with investors nationwide to invest in real estate, while also donating 50% of its profits to assist parents who are committing to adoption. LifeBridge Capital, making a difference, one investor and one child at a time. Connect online at www.lifebridgecapital.com for free material and videos to further your success.